Yeah, most people probably wouldn't know this. There's no reason you would or should. But the first time I thought we may be here longer than expected was when we were before we even got to the space station, when we were out in front of the space station and we started dropping the thrusters, and we got into a situation where we actually lost the ability to fully control the spacecraft. And I'm manual controls. And just going through that process of trying to maintain position, but to lose the ability to control 6 degrees of freedom, that had never happened. So at that moment, I'm like, wow, we may be in space a little longer than planned. So even all the way back to, that was June 6th of last year. Yeah, that thought entered my mind more than once out there in front of the space station while we were dealing with this.
Ready to roll?
Yep.
All right.
Real Texan.
Why should this matter to real Texans?
Today we're chatting with Barry Wilmore. He's a NASA astronaut, a former Navy test pilot, a homeschool dad, and a Christian from Houston, Texas. Thank you for joining us today, Commander.
Hey, it's great to be with you.
So when did you first know that you wanted to be in the sky?
Well, that's a good question. I guess I'm thinking back. We were driving back home from a Christmas Eve with family when I was like 4. And I was laying in the front seat. That was before kids had to wear seatbelts, as many years ago, with my head in my mom's lap, looking off the top of the window, looking for Santa Claus, right? And just seeing the stars, and just had a long conversation with my mother about the stars and the heavens and the sky. And so I think that's the very first, I hadn't thought about it in that light, but that's my first thought of, wow, what's up there and how do you get there, and all those kind of thoughts.
So
Yeah.
did come high school, is that kind of when you were like, maybe I want to be a pilot, or was that still?
No, I was focused on sports and other things high school kids are focused on. Into college, I majored in electrical engineering, played football as well. I went to Tennessee Technological University, and I majored in football, and I majored in electrical engineering, which is really, really not, they don't mix very well. So I didn't have a lot of free time. And as I started getting towards the end of my college, I started thinking, is this designing circuits? Is this what I want to do with my life? And I had that patriotic tug, kind of do my part for my country. I mean, that's truly what drove me to start investigating the opportunity to go in the military. And so that patriotic tug eventually led me to the Navy, and the Navy eventually led me to NASA, and here we are.
Here we are. You're almost 25 years in
Yeah.
as a NASA astronaut, probably one of their most seasoned after your most recent
You
mission.
stay long enough, you get seasoned, yes.
Especially after your recent mission. So you've become a bit famous after
That's so I'm told.
after everything happened with the
Right.
Starliner, and ended up staying on the ISS just a little bit longer than originally planned.
Mm-hmm.
What were kind of your initial thoughts or feelings when you first realized that this was going to be a longer journey than you expected?
Yeah, most people probably wouldn't know this. There's no reason you would or should. But the first time I thought we may be here longer than expected was when we were before we even got to the space station, when we were out in front of the space station and we started dropping the thrusters, and we got into a situation where we actually lost the ability to fully control the spacecraft. And I'm manual controls. And just going through that process of trying to maintain position, 6 degree of freedom. Some of your listeners, watchers will understand what that means, but basically you control in pitch, yaw, and roll, right? That's 3 degrees of freedom, just attitude. And then you translate forward and aft, up and down, left and right. So that's 3 more degrees of freedom. So you put all that together and you've got 6 degrees of freedom. Pitch, roll, yaw, translating forward, back, up, down, left, right. We lost the ability to control the forward aft kind of control of the spacecraft because of the thrusters that we lost. And all of that impacted the control of all the other axes as well. They were controllable, but it wasn't easy. And out there, and it's a long answer to your question, but out in front of the space station, when did I first think we may be here a little longer? Well, you lose 6 degree of freedom control, which at least if it had ever happened in space flight, we'd have many anomalies over the decades, right? Different things occur, some with thrusters. But to lose the ability to control 6 degrees of freedom, with the exception of thrusters that are stuck on and you put you into a kind of a spin, which had happened back in the Gemini program, that had never happened. And so at that moment, I'm like, wow, we may be in space a little longer than planned. So even all the way back to, that was June 6th of last year. Yeah, that thought entered my mind more than once out there in front of the space station while we were dealing with this.
Were there some questions you had kind of wish you'd asked beforehand before y'all even boarded the ship?
Oh my, yes. Oh, absolutely. There are questions that I could have asked. I mean, I got asked in a news conference afterward, "Who do you blame?" I'm like, "Well, you start with blaming me because I'm the commander of the spacecraft, and though as the crew, commander crew, you don't have insight into some of the mechanics of some of the capabilities of the spacecraft, the thrusters, the parachutes, various things like that. We don't have direct insight. We've got other teams and whatnot that look at all that stuff. But there's certainly in certain meetings and whatnot that I was a part of, I could have asked some questions that I did not even think I needed to ask at the time. But in hindsight, you got pretty good vision looking back. I could have asked some very important questions that I did not. So sure, yeah.
You've spoken quite often about how your faith kind of saw you through everything that happened over the last year. How did your faith come into play in those moments?
So that's an interesting question. My faith is no different than anyone else's true faith because it all centers around our Lord and our Savior, Jesus Christ. He is God. He came to earth as a man in human flesh, never committed a single sin, went to the cross, right? Paid the price for my sin, and endured the wrath of God the Father for my sin to appease my sin, justifying me. That's a short summary of the gospel. And so that aspect of who I am, redeemed, you don't separate that. Believers understand what I'm talking about, and your true believers that are listening or hearing or seeing, they know what I mean when I say that. You can't separate your life from your faith. They're intertwined. So in all aspects of my life, no different than any other true believer, like I said, it's all ensconced together. My faith in my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, the battle has been won. My eternal redemption is certain. I don't have to fret or be concerned about that. I look at you, I look at Creighton behind the camera, I see Nick behind this camera, and one thing I know is that all four of us are going to die one day without question if the Lord doesn't return. But we're going to leave this life, and we either know Christ as Savior or we don't. All of us. I do. He's redeemed me. He saved me. I didn't save myself. He went to the cross for me. And that truth trumps everything. There is no situation that I get into where I'm fretting, oh my, this is pretty bad, woe is me, because He's paid the price for my sin. I don't have to be concerned about woe is me, because this life's going to end, and it's going to end in the way He determines. And when it ends, by His grace alone, I'm already ready. And every true believer, like I said, that's listening or hearing or seeing this, understands exactly what I'm saying, because that's what true faith, true salvation, true redemption through Jesus Christ, that's what it brings.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So from the space station, as part of all this, you got to lead some Bible studies. What is that like? Does it feel different leading it there, or is it still kind of?
The first time we did a downlink with my church, this was when I was on space station 10 years ago. I didn't see it coming, but I'm sitting there sharing this gospel, this blessed gospel from the heavens, literally. I got a little choked up because I just never dreamed of, I look at myself as a kid. I was a little knucklehead in many respects. I mean, I was mischievous. Many things, many adjectives I could describe who that little kid was. And here that little kid was sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ, the greatest, most wonderful, most important message ever from space. I got a little choked up. Fortunately, we dropped communication for like a minute at that moment. So I was able to regain my composure. And when we came back, all was well. But it's pretty daunting at any time to be able to be in a position to share the gospel that saves. This is change. This is eternal hope. This is the only place there's true eternal hope resides, is in the gospel of Jesus Christ. And to be able to share that from any platform, certainly one from space, is something that I don't take lightly and I don't take for granted. And that certainly, like I said, is very a unique platform to be able to do that. So in your question, I did that a couple of times, some devotion, prepared devotions, and shared them in various platforms from there. I got the opportunity to do that. NASA allowed it, for just for those uses. It's not something that we're doing to, to spread or do those type of things, and nor should it be. But anyway, yeah, it's a special, very special, humbling type of opportunity to have.
Maybe an out of this world kind of memory.
Without question.
Were there some other of those that you've had over the years on the space station or here on Earth?
Yeah. I mean, I baptized my oldest daughter. I'm an elder at my church, so because of that, I baptized her. My youngest daughter didn't ask me to baptize her. That was fine. That's not because she doesn't like me. It's just she wanted Tommy, our pastor, to baptize her. So to sit there and watch her be baptized is certainly special when your children come into the family of Christ. I mean, there's nothing more wonderful than that. I mean, my personal redemption is great, but to see your children come to truth, it's wonderful and special. So that's probably the pinnacle. Yeah.
Absolutely. And thankfully you made it home in time for some of those more.
I did. Yeah. I think originally there was several scenarios because of when spacecraft come and go, cargo spacecraft come and go. You can't do some things when those cargo spacecraft come and go because there's science that's on the cargo spacecraft that you have to do. That's the reason that they bring, that if it comes up is to do the science. So you can't be leaving in the middle of that. So one of the most likely scenarios had us staying because of all of this until June. So until like right now is when we would have been coming back. But powers that be got all that, altered that. So we actually came back on the 18th of March, which got me back in time for my youngest daughter's graduation from high school. We homeschool, and she's in a homeschool co-op, and it's very special the way they do it because the classes are smaller. You're not graduating hundreds. It's in the teens, but I think there were 39, so this is the biggest homeschool graduation we'd ever been a part of. But anyway, the parent, the dad in most cases, actually takes a minute and says something about the graduate. So I didn't want to miss that. And say a few special words about my daughter in front of, those that were gathered there. And the chance to be back for that was wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
Having accumulated all of these days in space and with the mission extended a little longer than planned, right, did you get to take part in any of those experiments or missions that you wouldn't have otherwise gotten the opportunity to do?
We did. Having been there, both Sonny Williams and myself, having been there before, been on space station, we'd both done long duration. We did some of the basic, we did all the emergency training that you have to do to be on space station. We'd done some of the basic mechanical training, some of the basic scientific training, all of that basic. But when you're there and you're part of the crew, and a couple of people were not able to launch as planned because we had to have seats to go down. So we are the only crew there. So kind of because they had no other option, they had to use us. They had to play us, right? But we'd had the experience. We'd been there before. And assimilating back into standard space station operations, which is maintenance, science, spacewalks, operating the robot arm, all those things. Since we'd had the training, even recent training, to qualify us and get the check in the block, even though it wasn't expected we use it, we had it. And so it played out well because I've said a couple of times, we had a plan that was Starliner, tests on Starliner, some events on space station, but it was going to be short term. But we came prepared for much, much greater than that because you just never know. Spaceflight is difficult. If you sat back and watched NASA over the last several decades, you'd see some little things here and there, but we truly make it look easy. I mean, it's an army of really sharp individuals that are making things happen. And, we're the ones that get in front of the camera, the astronauts that you see us, but it's a whole group of individuals, sharp, patriotic, passionate individuals that are doing their job day in and day out to make all of this look simple. And it is not. It is very difficult. Flying in space is very hard, and doing it well is even harder. And occasionally things creep up that you don't expect. We know that. That's part of the business. And sometimes they creep up and it changes a lot of things, like this mission. So the thruster issues we had on Starliner really altered a lot of the space station plans. But that's what we do. We flex. We have plan, like I say, preparing and assimilate into this other option and still go forward and execute the plan of the day, as we say in the military, and day after day after day, month after month. And in this case was almost 10 months before we actually were able to, rectify and do those things to get us back. So yeah, it's a lot of work by a lot of people doing some great work for our nation. And sometimes situations like this gives you the opportunity to highlight some of those things that other people just generally would not know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you'd had that training. You assumed command of the ISS back 10 years ago
Right.
in your last mission. Sunny had done a stint as
Right.
commander previously, right? And
Correct.
she took over this during this most
Right.
recent mission as well, right?
Well, she did. Yeah, she was the PLT. That's space flight for pilot, assigned on Starliner. I was a commander, and so there's a lot of work. This isn't just training to fly Starliner. This is development. This is like a flight test development of a new capability. That's why it was me and her. We had the test pilot training background experience. So that's why we were in this position to affect this, as commander and pilot, to take this through the development of getting it ready to go to space. So you can't do everything. So we had to divide and conquer on some things. And one of the things we divided and conquered was space station stuff. Sunny, you got it. I got to focus on primarily the development of Starliner. Most of the development from our standpoint is avionics and software. So it's all the things, the displays and all the computer systems and that work and send signals to the thruster, send signals to the parachutes to fire, pyrotechnics that actually deploy. So it's those systems. It's not actually the thrusters themselves that we have purview over, like I said earlier, or the parachutes themselves. It's the systems that talk to those. So that's what we have purview on this development process. And so that was my primary responsibility. Sunny had a great bit of responsibility there too, don't get me wrong. But as far as being able to divide and conquer, space station's yours. So when we got extended, there was no reason to make me the commander of space station, because she had that focus and she should have been, and so they positioned her in that role. So and that's the way it should have been worked out.
Absolutely. You each had your area of expertise.
We did. I mean, any of us up there when we were Expedition 72 had Sunny, who wound up number 2 all-time U.S. with 608 days in space. Don Pettit was with us. I think he's number 3 at 590 days in space. Had me, I think I'm like number 7, something like that. It was 464. And then Nick Hague, he's like 400 and something, and almost 400, not quite 400, 3 something, maybe 400 himself. So, you got a great deal of experience on space station. Any one of us could have been the commander, but it made sense to make Sunny, and she did a good job. Yeah.
Over the years, how has your kind of perspective on space exploration changed?
I think it changes as the agency develops and comes up with certain specific goals that it has. As an astronaut, I am tasked to focus on what we're doing now. And what we're doing now is part of that. In times past, some of the other jobs I've had when I wasn't actually flying in space is some of the future programs. And some of those future programs were canceled. You go down a path and you say, this isn't necessarily what we want to do as an agency. So you cancel that program, you go to something else. And that happens several times. That's normal. So how does my focus change? My focus is what I'm doing now, right? When I was space station going up 10 years ago, that was Soyuz, flying the Soyuz rocket and focusing on that. There's no development in that. The space station was tried and true. There was not really development on that. It was exciting. It was great. Don't get me wrong. But when we got into Starliner and the development here and the those test pilot type of enzymes start switching around in you, and you go, yeah, get back to some of this stuff we did back in the day. Aircraft, not spacecraft. Though every flight is a test flight. There's certain test aspects. Even when I flew the shuttle, I was 129th launch of the shuttle. We still had some aspects of test, and then, but certainly not the first flight of a spacecraft like Starliner. So that was all ensconced in on that. And really, the blinders were on and stayed on for years as we're focused in on this task. While there's so many other things going on in the agency with Artemis and the plans to go to the moon, and they say eventually go to Mars and all that. So my focus was that. Now my focus, if you're asking about my personal focus, is how hopefully I can take the experience gleaned from what occurred through the process of Starliner, and incorporate some of those lessons learned into the Artemis processes that are ongoing, because we are full up. NASA is full up acquisition right now. I mean, it is acquiring new rockets, new spacecraft, new rovers, new space stations, new landing systems, human landing systems, systems to land humans on the moon. We're full up acquisition of all these different things, and I think we've got a lot of good lessons learned from Starliner that can help those programs and help them to successful conclusions. Yeah.
Well, it'll be very exciting to see where all that goes next.
It's an exciting time for sure.
So one thing I noticed when I was watching y'all disembark, you got up yourself. You were ready to get back. Was it just back onto solid ground, or what kind of drove you there?
I did get up myself. You're talking about when I got out of the capsule, instead of letting them lift me onto the gurney, I just stood up. Yeah. So I was in the capsule and watching. I was the last one out. And what they do is the techs come in and they rolled the other folks over and put this harness underneath them. And then they lifted them up onto the slide board to get them out the hatch. And I watched them do that with all three of them. And they're bent over, lifting, and I'm like, man, I don't want them throwing their back out on me. So what you didn't see is I'm like, no, I stood up in the capsule and I got on the slide board by myself. I didn't have them put that harness under me and lift me over. So that was just the beginning. So by the time I slid, and I'm sliding, I'm like, slow down. They're like, slow down. I'm like, I'm fine. It's okay. Anyway, so when I finally got outside the capsule, it was just, I'll stand up and get on that gurney. You don't need to lift me up over there either. So anyway.
So it was loving your neighbor.
It was. I mean, I didn't want them to hurt their back. So, because they're bent over and they're lifting. It's just and they've done it. Obviously, they've done it we were the 9th crew to return. So, I mean, they've done it. That's the process they've been doing, but they didn't have to do that with me. By God's grace, again, I felt good enough to stand up on my own. Now, the world's spinning a little bit. You come back, everybody, no human comes back to Earth after that long, 10 months almost, and the Earth isn't spinning because you're not, your neurovestibular, the semicircular canals in your ears is what give you balance, and they're adjusting to gravity. So it's gravity stinks when you first get back. It is tough. I mean, this glass, I can barely feel the weight, but when I first got back, it would have been heavy to lift because you're just moving mass in space. You're not lifting anything against gravity. So it's very different. And gravity, whew.
So are you pro-gravity or anti-gravity?
I'm very pro-gravity. Gravity is a wonderful thing. It's just tough for those little bit of time frame when you first get back from zero gravity. That transition is not necessarily easy. Yeah.
That certainly makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Commander Wilmore.
My pleasure.
And thank you for tuning into this week's episode of Real Texans.
back on Earth.
SpaceX Freedom, splashdown. Good main release.
Copy splashdown. We see main chutes cut. Nick, Alex, Butch, Sunny, on behalf of SpaceX, welcome home.